Morning, Cameron.
Morning, Tom. Thanks for jumping on. It's exciting to be here. It's kind of funny how it came together as well.
Yeah, it's good to finally talk to you. Good to finally do this. So we're basically just going to jump on every week. We're both obsessed with AI. We're both, well, you're a developer. I'm an aspiring developer. And to talk through everything that's happening in each week, why it matters, what we find interesting, what we're working on.
Yeah,
And
there's
my croaky
no
voice
no
probably won't be
shortage.
happening each time.
Yeah, there's no shortage of topics this week. I mean, we just came out of the LangChain Interrupt conference. I was kind of overwhelmed with information there to start with, and then this week we get big announcements from Microsoft and Google.
Yeah, and then you're going to go through every single research paper that you seem to be able to consume every week, which should be fun in the README section. I've been diving into the creative tools a bit more. So I'm going to take us through some of those things, what I'm
Yeah,
building, how it's evolving. So yeah. All right, let's get into the news first. This is a massive week. So it wasn't just Microsoft and Google. OpenAI last week dropped some product updates, and then they announced or finalized a massive acquisition yesterday, I believe. Do you want to go through which one do you want to do first?
let's start with LangChain.
Yeah, you want to start with LangChain? All right,
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
LangChain conference was sick. So we're both pretty involved in the LangChain community. I love those guys. And their product velocity is intense, like absolutely intense. But the conference was pretty much just like it was in San Fran. You and I were there. A bunch of other guys were there. We're talking through a couple of product updates, which I reckon we should mention. And then there were heaps of keynotes from different people using LangChain building agents. Um, yeah, what did you find interesting?
Yeah, it was more than just interesting new products and things. It was reassuring to see the reinforcement of the idea of keep it simple. And actually, a lot of these presenters showed diagrams and design documents of their systems. And I'm sitting there like, okay, these massive companies are actually they really are keeping it pretty simple. And when we get into these agentic infrastructures and all the tools that we have available, it's really easy to go overboard. So maybe not a new update, but it was just a big takeaway for me and something that I'm have been reminding myself of every day since.
It's all, yeah. What I was impressed by is like, I think the thing I came away from it, so it was all about agents, right? So their entire stack is just pivoted to agents. Um, I know the guys like Harrison and those guys talked about how the initial flow that we had for using complex workflows for AI was basically chaining together, like effectively chaining prompts together. But all of the really effective and impressive kind of use cases that we saw were agentic, some of which were these ambient agents, which they've started talking about,
Yep.
which I find quite interesting. And just the number of really high risk, high risk use cases that big companies got up and talked about, like BlackRock giving not investment advice, but investment strategies, I guess, via agentic systems across thousands of, people within their organization. There was this bank, that really big bank from Brazil, new bank. They've got like 21 million customers, and they do transfers via an agent in WhatsApp, like thousands a day, which is super. Like, I don't know if you can get any more high risk than that with an agent, which is like send money to Bob, don't send it to Mary, don't hallucinate and empty my bank account. These guys are using agents. Yeah, I was surprised actually. I don't know if you were.
And that was a theme. Every person I talked to almost said, well, now that I see these big companies doing this, it gives me so much more confidence and knowing that I'm on the right track and that this stuff is ready for production.
Yeah, do you want to go? We could go through some of the things that they announced, which was pretty cool, which I found interesting. So they announced a couple of product releases. I'm just getting it up here because there's so much to talk through. So LangSmith. So if people aren't familiar with their product stack, there's basically LangChain, which is connectors. There's LangGraph, which is their system for effectively building and orchestrating agent design. And they call it a graph because you can basically build nodes and connections around like agent behavior. And it might be interesting to talk about some of the architectures, like you mentioned before. And then there's LangSmith, which is effectively like keeping an eye on what your agents do. But they launched a couple of different things. They launched LangGraph platform, which is like an agent cloud service, which is pretty interesting. And it seems like everybody's jumping into that space. So when we get onto Google and on Microsoft, everyone is like basically realizing that they now need like hosted agent services, like agents as a service effectively. They also launched this like LangGraph pre-built marketplace. Did you dive into that? Did you check out
Yeah,
any
and
of those
actually,
agents in there?
I have the pre-built directory pulled up here. A funny story about LangGraph platform. Um, I signed up for LangGraph Cloud or LangGraph platform a few weeks ago, and I guess I didn't even realize that it was in such limited beta. And I had some gripes, I guess, initially, and then we were sitting there at the conference, and Harrison announces
Perhaps.
tomorrow it's in production. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense. So I had a good laugh on that. And similarly, with the pre-builts, I've been using those for a couple weeks. I've realized maybe I'm kind of weird. I find news by looking at people's GitHubs. So I had seen some of these projects out there on GitHub, and really, really fantastic starter projects that can take you a long ways. I'm not deeply interested in wire, web interfaces and stuff like that. So they've put these things out so you can skip that part and just work on your agents.
Man, look at the weekly downloads of that top one. That was the other thing I didn't realize how many like downloads they're getting every month.
When they
So,
pulled up the
they highlight
slide
that.
about surpassing OpenAI, um, yeah, I
Yeah,
guess
so
I was
I think that's
surprised.
the Python. It's the Python package, right? Yeah, this one.
Yes,
And it's more than the OpenAI agent SDK competitor. It's pretty wild, hey.
it is. It
Um,
is.
Explain to me that MCP thing that you mentioned. So each one of these agents is also now an MCP server.
Sure. So I don't remember when, but you've been able to integrate MCP with the LangGraph platform. But then with the release of LangGraph platform, which is the cloud hosted version, you by default, every state graph that you publish in the cloud becomes an MCP server. So, and we can demo that and I'll show you, but I can connect my agents that are running in LangGraph Cloud to Claude Desktop. So then I have the power of the Claude agent natively, and then I have an unlimited number of tools and agents that I can offload things to um, through MCP.
Hmm. And MCP is such an annoying word now. It's like so right after we were at the LangChain conference, and then I went to an MCP event, just a classic like some marketing manager in Silicon Valley had some extra cash, and they just went, let's put on an MCP event, like completely unrelated to the app that they have, like hardly any product release, lots of free booze. Just all these people just like, yeah, this is MCP now, and they've got a massive banner on the wall. I'm like, oh man, I think we've reached peak MCP confusion.
Yeah, what's funny is we were late, so I think we missed some things. We were at the same event, and I showed up, and I was like, I guess I'm a total nerd because I was really excited about the MCP content presentations and stuff like that, but I think we missed all that, so had
Yeah.
another
The,
funny laugh at myself.
the other thing I found interesting, so the companies that were presenting, they were like BlackRock, Uber, LinkedIn, they were all showing like agents, right? pretty much every, and the Cisco ones were nuts. They're really, really complex, you know, execution. The thing that I found interesting was like, everyone is talking about evals as the starting point of your app. So you build like, effectively like evals drive everything at each part of the process of building agent workflows and the agent stack. And so they launched that open evals. Did you play with that open evals thing that they launched? I didn't get a chance to dive into it, but it's like a chat
I
simulation.
haven't, and I don't know.
Data set.
Is that? No, I haven't.
It's like an open source, but basically they're realizing that like the quality of the agent execution effectively is hinged on high quality evals. And there's like basically three types of eval standard. There's like the offline one, just when you're building your agent architecture and building a stack, prompt engineering and referencing your eval data set. Then there's online, which is like the simple reinforcement learning kind of component that you might see in, say, OpenAI, where you've got like thumbs up and a bunch of feedback. And then there's this in the loop eval, which is basically as the agent is executing when you interact with the user, you also then inject effectively evaluations into your agent execution loop, which is pretty cool. We should do a deep dive. I want to do a demo on that on a follow-up episode maybe. And then they also launched this LLM as a judge, which is basically like if you have that ecosystem or that system, they have basically introduced like a LLM kind of architecture to be the oversight and judging the execution flow of your agent, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, and LangChain has some good.
Inbox.
They have some good cookbook notebooks out there that will walk you through a simple evaluation, and I found that very helpful.
And then this, I don't know, they had a couple of open source kind of product packages I want to play with, like Agent Inbox, where you can basically just like manage and bring in all of your agent kind of activity. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the UX of Codex, which OpenAI launched as well, where you can sort of, you see all of your agents firing off, you see their progress. I don't know, we haven't really coalesced around a standard UX for like humans managing their agents.
Right, it's the first one that I've seen, you know, really put together. But the idea is, you know, the example out there is a email inbox manager, where the AI reads your emails, it decides if it's actionable, and you define your own rules within the code, and then, and I could show it actually, but you
bring up that GitHub repo actually, because that'll be interesting. So they basically released the agent like email manager. Apparently the CEO, Harrison, has been having most of his emails answered by this bot for a couple of months. I really want to get it running so that I never send you a real email ever again.
And I can show, I have it set up. I actually converted it to work with my Microsoft email. So the demo they have out there is for Gmail, and you have to set up the credentials and all that. So it's a little bit of a hurdle if you're not familiar with that process. But I think this is the... Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
You've actually got it running. I'll put you on the spot. We can always do it at another time.
Well, we can cut this out if it's...
There's that one, and then there's also they have their social media manager agent. There's a stack of them that look pretty handy, that are just pre-built, ready to roll. The reason I like them is because I think it's one of the reasons why I like LangChain is the fact that you can, you're model agnostic, you're stack agnostic. You can blend providers across all of your execution.
Yep. Well, I would pull this up. I had it saves all of your information in your browser, and I set it up in my other computer. I guess I could probably find it here real quick. Well, let's just do a separate session there. But the idea is it's like a task manager. So you can at least, I don't have any content in here.
Yeah,
you can see what it looks like. So you would connect your inboxes, and you can have multiple email inboxes or task queues, whatever. And then the AI reads through that content, decides based on the rules that you defined whether it's actionable or not, And if it is, it shows up under this interrupted section, and then it gives you a synopsis, like a AI summary, and it says, I've marked this as approved. Do you agree? And then you hit yes, or you type a little response of why you would decline it, and it's like a task queue. So the example is centered around email, but it's much more broad than that. And that's where the whole idea of interrupt and human in the loop comes into place. So seeing what you can do with LangGraph platform in the cloud, you can instantly publish your agents one click. This is going to be huge because it's absolutely necessary that, and I'm sure you run into it too. You have
like
multiple agents
level
running on the side, and you kind of lose track of what they're doing, and jumping all over the place.
Yeah.
So this gives you kind of a one-stop shop dashboard for all your agents, which is awesome.
We definitely need it outside of the dev environment. So I've played with Devon a fair bit, and they force your interactions into effectively email via pull requests or Slack only. But when you're breaking out to other apps, other executions, like say social media management agent and an email agent and your executive assistant agent, this is free, right? Like they just built it and released it, or is it actually a product?
Yeah. This is all open source. They do have a link here on the GitHub repo. So you don't even have to. Well, you deploy the agent graph in the background, but then you don't even have to deploy your own dashboard. So this is the hosted version, dev.agentinbox.ai. And then there's a link when you publish to LangGraph Cloud. You paste that in, put your API key, and then, that's it. And then it will connect. So you don't even technically have to deploy your own front end.
Yeah, sick. What else caught your eye? What about the talks or any of the sponsors? Sponsors are sick. I love a good conference like that where the actual like the sponsors are as interesting as the people talking. But what about you?
Yeah, well, I'll hit on something that maybe is not the typical answer, because of course we had to talk about the new agent engineer role that's going to be needed, evaluations, human in the loop. Those are really the main points. As far as presentations, I think I actually got the most out of. What's that?
Before you jump onto that, talk more about the agent engineer. I think that's pretty interesting. Like he's trying to position, or LangChain trying to position like agent engineering as opposed to AI engineer, which is what a lot of people in the industry like. What did it actually like define it as, right?
There was actually a good slide.
Yeah.
It's
basically like Evals, product engineering, development, product and prompting.
Really combining the machine learning to all of the different components that make up agents. It's going to be really hard to work in silos. So the quote is, agents are a team sport, and I see where that is. So Tom, in your experience, do you see gaps in expertise, or do you see people who are really maybe great developers in a certain area, say front end, but struggle with some of this AI stuff?
100%. I think the struggle is on a couple of fronts in my day-to-day. So I work in a tech company, obviously, and then deal with GPUs a lot. One part is like just some of them just are rejecting the whole notion that AI in the development domain will be significant. I disagree with that a lot, but let's put those people to one side. I think the other factor is they want the outcome of building agentic applications, whether they're product managers or whether they want to build them themselves, but lack the understanding or how the industry is coalescing around the engineering architecture, or like the application architecture. Which I think, based on this conference, that was another big takeaway for me, is like it seems like the people who are really participating in this a lot, which I think is primarily the LangChain community. There are a couple of other communities that I think we should probably mention, but it seems like LangChain's got the most active developer community. They have coalesced around an execution format and standard for these things now in production at scale. And I think the difference is like, and probably what Harrison's trying to explain is like, there is a way, just like there was a way that we all coalesced around building web apps in the 2.0 phase, you know? It's kind of like we're discovering our version of the model view controller, kind of like old school
Right.
approach to building SaaS apps, you know, like back in the day. I'm showing how old I am now. I think that format and standard of architecture is now emerging around these things. And I think getting that information to devs and engineers who want to build effective agents is important. Like I have these conversations every day at work. They're like, yeah, so what else did you find interesting from, say, the talks? So not necessarily the LangChain guys, but like other stuff. I've got a few thoughts for them. Keen to hear yours.
Yeah, I think I was saying that it probably wasn't the most exciting for a lot of people, but for me, the DocETL talk by Shreya from UC Berkeley.
Yeah, that was interesting. You want to talk through like what that is, what the project is? I thought that was pretty fascinating, actually.
Yeah, it's essentially DocETL is an open source project that started at UC Berkeley. And so Shreya, who's leading that project, gave a talk there. And it's essentially a agentic ETL pipeline. And if you're a true data scientist, I think you would really enjoy using this tool. There's a hosted version out there. And man, we have so many things to talk through. I should pull all these things up ahead of time.
Yeah, well, you can join. I think she's got a website. So she built this as her doctoral thesis, and she's a machine learning researcher, right?
Yep.
That's her background. I thought it was interesting. A lot of the talks, hers and others included, were like AI-based data processing for documents, and how much of a significant enterprise challenge that is.
Exactly.
And
so if you're building,
so many people with so much money are throwing so many resources at that challenge, and everyone's still like, what's the best way? You still don't know. Yeah, do you want to bring up the repo?
Yeah. And
we can chuck it in the show notes as well.
Share my screen here. But yeah, if you've built some apps on your desktop and you're dealing with a limited amount of data, everything probably works fine. And then people say, it's so hard to go to production, and it's things like this as far as data pipelines that might be underappreciated. And that's actually a lot of work, right? So you hear about mapping all your data, extracting it, creating metadata out of that, storing it somewhere in a database. There are a lot of steps there, and it's actually pretty complex. And the rule has not changed. Garbage in, garbage out. And there are likely a lot of people out there excited about the agentic technology and throwing garbage into these things. And it's interesting because even in my experience, there are things that I've done with smaller models, maybe like a Llama 3.1 a few months ago. And then you compare that to the newer, say, ChatGPT models, and you can throw some garbage in there at a small scale and still get good results. But once you try to take it to scale, it's going to be an absolute disaster. So this project essentially allows you to simplify your pipeline creation. And they have a hosted app here that allows you to do that. And actually, Tom, if we can do some demo stuff, and I can take some time and show the one that I have set up. But it allows you to upload your data, and this will automatically do the chunking and splitting. It creates a JSON data set, and then you can define your steps, whether that's map, reduce. So you can build pretty complex pipelines with this tool, and it allows you to do it pretty quickly, and even better, immediately see the results in a nice organized format.
Right. I didn't realize this was so built out based on her talk. She was talking more about the technical challenges, right? It would be good to link to that talk once it gets published. I didn't realize it was a full-on product. This is what, you know, the OG of this kind of workflow is Greg Kamradt. I always mispronounce his name. Super big in the LangChain community, and also now he's the chair of the ARC Prize. If you've heard about the ARC Prize, which is like this unsolvable Francois Chollet kind of LLM test, but he is like the OG of embeddings, chunking, you know, document processing, content processing. This is great because it sort of like takes it out of the dev stance. Yeah,
it's funny that you mentioned Greg. Oh, sorry. It's funny that you mentioned Greg because that's really where I started with a lot of the AI. Was his notebooks were like rocket fuel for me, and at my job, it was everything that I needed to, you know, I'd been building out things in like poor man's data warehouses, like personal data warehouses for a long time, just waiting for that AI moment. And then it hit, and Greg had some fantastic work out there that really helped me out. So yeah, I'm a huge fan, and I thought it was really cool when he was part of the O3 announcement as well.
Yeah, what did he work with those guys, or was it just because O3 they were basically, I think they got access to the tests. They got access to O3 to run it through the ARC Prize as one of the primary tests that they were trying to absolutely slam, right? And they were doing the O3 preview.
Yeah, it was O3 preview. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's super fascinating. I don't know. There was a lot of presentations that I really loved. One of the things I really liked was how many people in sort of my area, which is marketing and sales, and sort of like a software developer and aspiring software developer, and founder in software and software space for marketing and sales, is how many of the people or the companies that I really admire were talking about like really large scale production deployments of agents, like Monday.com. Their approach was really interesting. And they're trying to build like an agent marketplace, like come in as developers. Everyone's trying to win the developer community of agent builders, right? Come in, build with us. We've got a marketplace. You can earn with us. That's pretty interesting. And then some of the other players, like how they actually kind of built these point solutions, but point solution agents. But we're still in the narrow task band. Like I really want to get to the point, or push to the point, where for broader kind of business case applications, agents start doing more. We're not quite there yet. It would be interesting to get a few examples of that. The other really interesting talk actually was from the guys at Devon. So I mentioned like I use Devon a bit. That's probably like the best from most accounts, and in my experience anyway so far, it's like the best agentic coding assistant, where unlike Cursor, which we're all familiar with, like they have their like agent mode, right? It's more, or the background agent mode that they release, pardon me. Devon's like basically the interface is like in Slack, and it's just like go away and do this thing and then come back to me when you've got a problem. Like they force the UX into a method which disconnects you from an observation on purpose. But the guys that like how the two of the things that I found really interesting. So they released Deep Wiki. If you want to pull that up, do you want to pull up the Deep Wiki URL, or I can share my screen and show it. But basically it's like, if you just Google for Deep Wiki, it's fine. But basically everything we're talking about is about context. So the doc.etl thing is just about better context. Everyone's just trying to get better context for these models, so these agents. And the way that the Devon guys have done it is they basically just pass every single GitHub repo that they can get their hands through this like custom pipeline that creates very good documentation that the models can interact with. And obviously they need to invest in this and do this to improve the context, to improve the outcomes of the agent, right? But it's really cool. Like, so you can put this in pretty much any prominent GitHub repo and click on it. And the guys are saying like, they were claiming this, which I think I probably believe based on the ones that I've looked at anyway, that it's actually better than the regular documentation that's built.
Right.
You want to just click into one. It's really cool.
Yeah, and these
Basically,
documentation.
Devon.
Yeah. Okay. So, and actually, maybe
And the
we
whole idea
pull up
is
like docetl. Let's do that since we were just talking about
yeah,
that.
DocETL, all the LangChain. I was checking out the I was using this during the LangChain tutorial session on LangMem, so their memory package, and it was excellent. The whole idea is that it's like there's these charts that get generated, anything that the model needs to traverse, needs to understand, and they invest heavily in doing this. And I think it's like the right evals, the right prompts, the right context, which effectively is investing in this infrastructure around how you build your agents for whatever it is, I think is like the next big unlock around getting the agent quality, the agent task outcomes to be of higher quality.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's all about context. And it's funny because there's times where, at least for me, I've maybe explained MCP, and I'll use examples like it's like web search. That's where I start usually. The button in ChatGPT where you can enable web. Okay, well now you have additional web tools that you can, and sometimes it sounds underwhelming, I think, to people. And same with this documentation. Okay, I gave my agents access to documentation. Big deal.
Yeah.
But when you start combining all these little things together, it becomes insanely powerful. And like you were saying, that gives your
and it's I think the parameters people have where they're like, oh, this is boring and dumb or not relevant to me, is because potentially they think about the chat interaction they have with a lot of AI powered apps or LLM powered apps, in which case the big model providers are trying to just crunch the crap out of that with like a massive context window. Whereas where it really matters is the combination of this investment of energy and time into these kinds of documents or this kind of context, whatever the task is, and then really high quality memory architectures. Because as the agent execution, like time span increases, the context windows are not enough. Like you need good management of the information at the right time, particularly if like some of the examples. So Box is a great example. They were talking at conference. He was talking about document processing as well. If you're, they work with the top 500, Fortune 500 companies. If you're trying to traverse thousands of documents with all sorts of random, unstructured, structured data, images, text, charts, everything, like it's just impossible. Like I don't think it's just like the human mind. Like it's just never going to be sufficient to jam all of that into context. It needs to be curated, and it needs to be curated for the task that the agent is doing. And it needs to be like refined over time. I think this will be an area where we see like the most impressive innovation will be a combination of like high quality context, high quality memory state management. Like, yeah, I really want to do a deep dive into some of the memory approaches out there and compare. So there's Letter, LangMem, there's Zep, which is like, knowledge graphs. Like there's a whole kind of like, it's a big kind of wide open space as to what the best approach is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I thought that was pretty interesting.
I totally agree with you. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. The other thing I would mention about the Devon talk, which I thought was interesting, is that they actually, I might mention this before we jump off this, which is something that's similar to this that Microsoft launched a couple of days ago, is NL, I think NL Web. If you just Google that and bring up the GitHub repo, NL Web or NLP Web. Microsoft, yeah, here we go.
I had not experimented with this yet, but you were talking about it yesterday.
It was a really small part of what they were talking about in their big show and tell kind of session, but it's just a simple open source package. But effectively, it's just trying to do this improve context, but for any website, the open source package, and they're kind of trying to, I think, participate in this web search kind of like democratization of data for LLMs. And obviously, when you're behind, you go with open source, right? So competing with everyone, but you can use it as an open source package to basically convert and compete with sort of the LLM text movement, which is like LLM text your website, so it converts everything to markdown so that LLMs can more effectively engage with your published web content. The other thing that I thought the Devon guys was interesting, I don't know if you can pull it up, but it might not be too relevant. Is that they were talking about training a custom model all of these big guys, when they get to scale, they train custom models for specific tasks, right? The Cursor guys do it for very specific components. And they had a very interesting kind of description. Their model was for like training, for building CUDA kernels. I'm not exactly sure on the technical side of it. You probably have to give me the details on that, Cameron, when you can, but of how they were managing the credit assignment and the terms of like, multi-step episodic kind of benchmarking of how an AI, an LLM gets to a result and how they assign credit across the number of attempts. That's like super fascinating area. And obviously they're doing that across so many other parts of their stack to try and just incrementally improve the outcomes across every single part of their agent execution flow. I don't know, they were pretty cagey, but I really want to know more about what's under the hood.
Yeah, same here. The whole concept of like reward tokens and things like that, honestly, I haven't paid much attention to because I'm like, that seems kind of silly. It's like, do we need to say please to our agents when we ask them to perform a task? Do we need to say great job? I always thought that was kind of silly. I always thought that was silly, but I've heard a lot of talk about reward tokens and going into that training process. So I need to spend some time in that area.
Yeah, I think I'd like to do a deep dive on it in a later episode, but in this context, what they were talking about is the construction of the reinforcement learning process, and how you assign credit effectively to which component of the LLM's kind of iteration towards the correct result, and how you penalize. So you can penalize, like penalties and rewards, and how you assign that. The reason why it's critical is because the DeepMind guys have talked a little bit about this, what they call the age of experience, which is where we're running out of data that humans have created for these things to learn on. We are moving into like the next stage, which is like they create their own data sets or they create their own experiences. And then you have to optimize the credit assignment through the process to get to the reward outcome. And then it can learn at scale across multiple different iterations. And I reckon like that's the next phase of how we'll get to like the next breakthrough of, I guess, reasoning intelligence. At least that's one area of research. All right. Do you want to move on? Do you have anything else from the LangChain event, or other than the many demos we're going to have to do in the future?
Yeah, I think the demos, let me take a quick look. There are a couple things. Man, there was so much there, but the announcements from LangChain, particularly like the LangGraph platform, I'm having an absolute blast with that. And then the Prebuilts are amazing. And it's kind of interesting because, like I showed that hosted agent inbox, and it makes you wonder, are they going to push out some products, paid products, like consumer products or, like business solutions? I don't necessarily think so, but they have so many of these pre-builts that it's possible.
Yeah, I wonder about that. I'd take a bet and say probably not, but it seems like the phase that they're in is just developer adoption and proving that enterprises use LangChain or the LangChain stack at scale. Like when you need to build things at scale for really, really challenging things, like challenging assignments, then I think that's where they're at. Whether that's the only solution, obviously it's not. There are lots of other ones, but that's sort of where they're at. But they might, I don't know.
Yeah, no, but it's helpful. It's helpful to be able to see what you're about to embark on before you start. I don't know how many times you've gone to a repo, you read through it, and you're like, "Oh, this sounds awesome," and then you set it up, and you're like,
"Yeah,
this is. I wish I wouldn't have spent all that time on this."
Yeah, I think that's in like startup land, like when you have a B2D, like a business to developer motion, time to hello world is critical, which is basically like how long does it take for me as a developer to get to a point where I can be confident this actually works.
Yeah.
And so whatever you do, you just have to do anything. The Vercel guys are excellent at it, and I think the LangChain guys are as well. All right, let's talk through everything that Google announced. The first thing is just the scale that they're talking about. Like, I'm not sure if you saw the metrics of basically, I believe, oh, sorry, no, about 10 trillion tokens per month. And now it's 480 to like pushing up to 500 trillion tokens per month, which is unbelievable scale. And then now they're pushing across a bunch of their models. I don't know. Do you use their models like much? Gemini models? Like I don't.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I've started to. I, I honestly, I'm still a little bit unsure about the costs because 2.5 experimental, I think it is. I was using it in Klein for a few weeks and it was not incurring any charges. And then one day it was like $50. And I was like, whoa, what happened? And then it's weird because I use Klein and it has a meter, tells you how much you've spent. And sometimes it shows that I'm incurring costs and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm still not very clear. But anyways, past that, the actual capabilities of it are amazing. I mean, I've been using it in combination with GPT 4.1 and they're very comparable. I mean, the benchmarks I think say 2.5 is the best, but it is absolutely insane. And with that amount of context, it really does make a difference.
Yeah.
Especially with coding.
Well, I really want to use it more for coding. So, and they've updated, like similar to what we're talking about with the LangChain guys, they've basically built a bunch of prompts into all of their various AI things. There's so many like ways to use their AI tools. So like Gemini, they released 2.5 Pro Preview, which is like their high-end model. Apparently it's beating some specific benchmarks. Like it's really high on the legal benchmark set, which is interesting.
Well, they keep updating it. And I thought during the announcement, they said that now it's across the board the best model on all benchmarks. There was a slide about it.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the time when benchmarks go away, but then they've got this slide which says like driving to prompt you to start coding, which I thought was pretty cool. And then they also had like the prompts between the sets. So like you do say a deep research generation, and then it will give you a prompt to convert it into a web app, for example. So they're trying to drive users across different interaction patterns with it. So there's so much stuff. Like there's that. A couple of things like that caught my eye during was this, and I've been thinking about diffusion. It's a diffusion LLM, which is one of the things that they announced, and it is fast. Like it's the fastest thing ever. Like, have you checked these out, these diffusion LLMs before?
No, I haven't. So
this one came out a while ago from these guys, Inception Labs, which I thought was pretty cool. This is like a couple of months ago, after you kind of highlighted it. This was in research for a bit, and then it was just sort of, they released a developer endpoint. The reason why this is cool is they actually visualize sort of how it works. So, you know, diffusion LLMs, right? Sort of like rendering down batches of text rather than next token prediction. So in here, like this is their version. So this is a Mercury coder, I think it's specific to coding, right? So if I say, all right, make a particle system, and it's got this diffusion effect here, you can see what it's like. So it's sort of like, you see how fast that was, just rendering down all of this. If I go back, you probably see like, so a new chat. Let's try this one. It actually like sort of shows it working out and rendering down, you know, diffusion, like a diffusion model would for an image, but for a batch of text or a batch of like code in this case. But it's
the
just
old school Microsoft logo there. Is that intentional?
This one?
That? No, the square blocks. It was like the old school, like Windows XP logo, the diffusion visualization.
Is it? I didn't notice.
That's why I'm like, is that intentional or is that just? But it says Mercury is powering NL Web.
Yeah, so that was another thing. So these guys obviously paired up with Microsoft, right? Now Google. These guys are like a research lab for this one from a few pretty well-known kind of researchers. So it looks like they're partnered up with Microsoft, and now Gemini has their diffusion model. The reason why I think it's fascinating is because it's like the tokens per second speed is just insane. Like, and it sort of makes me think the innovation around the quality of these models might then change people's perception of like the actual like tech stack, like lower down the stack you might require for a lot of these applications in terms of speed. And it might challenge some of these like, specialist providers for certain types of inference chips or that sort of stuff. It might be that we don't need any of those. We just needed like innovation on the LLM layer. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Is it faster than like Grok and Cerebros? And I don't know if you've used those, but
yeah, so that's what I mean. Like, so the whole idea of like, say Grok, for example, is the LPU chip architecture. They've got their specific chip architecture for, and Cerebros apparently has a similar thing for inference.
So you think this this blows that out of the water potentially will?
Well, like maybe like, is this innovation layer on the way that the models actually execute for, say, text related output in this case? Does that negate the requirement to invest so much in the like the compute layer innovation that was trying to basically speed up inference, and so we didn't have to click it, can you write me a novel, and then you have to wait. Like we're back to like dial-up days. That's what everyone was saying. But it's pretty exciting. I thought this was probably one of the more interesting things that they announced. It was a really small chunk of what they talked about. The other thing that I thought was great was Veo 3, their video model, which was really cool. And then they upgraded and like redeveloped all of their, so everyone's like competing in this space, and then they upgraded all of their kind of interactions. Like this guy on his boat quoting Hemingway was pretty sick. Then they upgraded all of their kind of labs executions of these into the different apps. So there's Flow, say a filmmaking tool. Then there's Stitch, which is like design interaction. They've launched a coding competitor. I haven't played with that. We'll do a head-to-head against all the other ones. Project Mariner, that's coming soon. It's like a Manus competitor. Then they deployed a bunch of these things directly into search. Like they're absolutely going for it. I don't know. I'm very bullish on Google at the moment.
Absolutely. Do you find it funny that they put these things out there in such a like cutesy, it's like felt cute, might delete later vibes here, and they're just mind-blowing apps, and it just like, to me, it just doesn't look like Google, and it's like you don't see a lot about it out there, and they're absolutely incredible apps. They're AI labs.
Well, Google has I don't know, historically they're probably the worst in terms of like coming up with products, running them for a bit and then sunsetting them. They've been doing that for years. It gets annoying because you get attached to some of these products and they're like, all right, that's going away now. But you're right, like the product velocity that they've gotten back to is just excellent. It's kind of like they found their mojo again, which is really cool. This tool, Whisk, is really sick. It's like it's very simple kind of image generation kind of style converter. I was playing with that a little bit, which is really excellent. And the consistency that they're executing on with the VO model in terms of character or scene consistency is like getting really good. Obviously, they have a vested interest in investing in like advertising and marketing and creative kind of space because so much of their revenue comes from advertising. What else was there?
Man, Flow?
Nope. Yeah, Flow is like so it was Video FX and now they've just called it Flow, which is powered by their new VO3 model. I haven't tried that yet. You actually need to buy. They've launched like an AI package subscription, which is, I believe, $250 a month, and they're trying to bundle everything to compete with the sort of chat, the OpenAI kind of stack. The other thing was, I don't know, did you ever play with Firebase Studio, which is like the cloud IDE?
Barely.
They had? Yeah,
Barely.
I played with it a little bit. But then a combination of that with this Jules coding agent, I think will become pretty interesting. Everyone's heating up in the coding space. They're obviously going to try with that. Oh man, so much stuff that they launched. What else did you see?
Yeah, I think those are the same ones. I was with Flow, and by the way, I hope that's not true that you need the $250 a month, because I was using it and I don't think that I signed up for that. So we'll see. We'll find out. But that was the first video where I'm watching it. I know that it's AI generated, and I'm still sitting there like, I would never, I probably wouldn't know this is AI. I don't know. Who knows? Well, like 6 months down the road, maybe go back and look at it, and we adapt and we recognize different patterns. But that was the first one where I was truly like, I know this is AI, and I still wouldn't, I can't tell.
It's been getting that good for a while, but I think it's like the next phase of this will be longer running. Like you can execute for about 8 seconds, but the quality threshold is so high now. I want to talk more about the creative tools, but depending on if we have enough time, I might do that next week. Yeah, this is that ultra subscription plan that they have. I think the reason why they are getting excellent, as you say, it's also the reason why they've launched their SynthID product, is so that they can effectively watermark and Google watermark everything. I'll show it to you here to indicate that it's actually AI generated content. I'll put it in the show notes so you can see it later.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I signed up for the wait list, and I'm curious to check it out. But what type of business opportunities do you think that will generate? I mean,
the SynthID thing or the VO?
Yeah.
I think it's probably just a safety trust thing that they wanted to participate in for releasing it.
Yeah, I was wondering if we'll see startups focused in this area.
In the verification layer?
Yep.
No, it's not an area that I've thought a great deal about. Like, what do you think?
I don't know. That's why I was asking you. But yeah, the whole, there's a lot of issue with trust when it comes to AI, and that seems to be a major step in the direction of in some way observability, I guess, or like visibility into what's going on behind the scenes. So yeah, I don't know. I had that question for myself, and I don't know.
I don't know. The other thing I thought, and I'll get off Google now, is they did release like a Gemini agent mode, or that will be coming in the next couple of months. So like they're pushing agents, which is basically to compete with OpenAI, which was really cool. They're still behind the ball on releasing their agent space product. Like they still haven't actually executed on that and released it, so you can start building agents. Like it's still like closed private beta, private preview, even after they released the 808 protocol, which I thought was like kind of a missed opportunity, really. Like if they really do want to get in there, they need to start being, playing in that space more effectively, or at least trying to capture some more of it. I think that was everything on Google, other than just being impressed. Before you step on a Microsoft, OpenAI obviously released Codex last week, and then they've closed this deal with Johnny Ive's startup, which I think Sam Altman started with him, called IO. Did you see that?
I hadn't seen that. IO?
Yeah, so Johnny Ives, who designed the iPhone, the iPad, and basically everything,
he started effectively like a phone or an interface startup with Sam Altman. Well, Sam Altman was involved a couple of years ago, and then they basically finalized the acquisition of that into that startup into OpenAI. The reason why it's important is because did you see the Sequoia Ascent AI kind of conference they had? He was speaking at that, and he basically said something interesting, which is like all the users of ChatGPT or OpenAI products that they have. He described how, kids basically homework and they use it and interact with it. Older people, it's like work tasks and it's very fine, kind of defined kind of flow. But he said that there's a really interesting category of users in the college space that basically use it as an operating system for their life. I think it was a bit of a tell where he's sort of like, this is my prediction. There are user patterns and user patterns of interaction in that category, which will define how we interact with computers into the future. And I think he wants to embed that interaction pattern into a device of some description. So it really does become the OS of your life. Like I reckon they've got some insight around like great interaction patterns and from that user cohort embedded into some sort of device that replaces your phone. Oh, and then the only other, so I think that's on that's interesting. The only other thing that I want to mention from the Google side of things is XR. So they're trying to get back into the smart glasses space. So we'll see how that goes after the last time they gave it a try. All right, that's everything Google.
Yeah, I'll have to check out IO. It's just called IO. I'm looking it up.
Yeah, Johnny. Yeah,
totally unrelated to like WorldCoin on the device. That's what I thought you were talking about at first. No,
I think that's a different. That's
totally different.
I don't know how this guy has so many things.
Interesting. Right.
Stuff.
Right. Well, he doesn't have equity in OpenAI, so he has to work on other stuff, I guess, right?
I think he's probably rich enough.
That's what he says.
Equity in Stripe, and well, that's actually what he said. Yeah,
that's what he says.
He actually said,
I just do it for.
I wish I had.
I love it. Yeah.
Well, I think in an interview with the All In podcast, he said, I wish I had taken equity just to avoid these kind of questions now. So post, but anyway, do you want to talk through anything interesting from Microsoft? You're the Microsoft guru on this podcast.
Just by default, I don't necessarily claim it. Yeah, I think
I don't even have an Azure account.
I think it's really interesting that Microsoft has taken a big step into the open source, and it's really like, where is the line these days in enterprise versus open source? And there's a lot of overlap there, and I think a lot of people in enterprise are unsure about trust with open source and these things. And there's been so much talk about MCP, and when these big players like Microsoft and others start jumping on board, a lot more people start listening. And then at the conference, they announced they're building an MCP native to Windows. And I didn't catch how, when they say native to Windows, what exactly they mean. I'm aware of the like Teams Toolkit, for instance. It's a open source, it's a GitHub repo that you can use to build apps within Teams. So I can, as an individual, I can build agents, in VS Code on my computer. I can test it all out on my local computer and then publish it into the Microsoft Teams App Store. And then you can use your agents and things within Microsoft Teams. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, Teams, including myself, but it has its strengths, and particularly in a business environment. I come from a infrastructure and security background, and that has been a major question when it comes to AI. A lot of people build these apps, and it's like, oh man, how would I publish this out to a bunch of people securely? So for me, the most impactful thing is Microsoft they've done an amazing job with identity. Nobody can touch what they've done with identity. So to be able to have your Active Directory intra tenancy It's already there. Most companies are running some flavor of Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Identity. So
Yeah.
these tools allow you to just leverage that existing infrastructure, and you can do like role-based access, observability, things like that, native within the Microsoft platform. And then your users, you don't have to worry about building necessarily complicated interfaces or worry about design on the interface side. You can create bots, agents that you can use within teams. And so,
Yeah, so do
what's
you
really
reckon?
interesting, I was talking about using LangGraph agents through Cloud Desktop. So you have the Cloud Desktop native agent orchestrating other agents, and in the Teams environment, it actually works very similarly. So through Microsoft Copilot, that's the native agent, I can say, run this task and then call this other agent, and it will pull it into the same chat window. So
Right.
when we start talking about agent to agent, and I don't know if Microsoft, off the top, I can't remember if they talked about A2A at all or if they have plans for that. But there are a lot of
I think we're
different ways
participating in it.
where all of a
Yeah.
sudden, it seems like within the last couple weeks, all of a sudden we're talking about communication between various agents. So
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Like, so basically saying like, because of the context that Microsoft has across everything and the distribution, if they can get this right, then distribution of agents through here will just be the default. Like, so it'll just, because it will be so easy and it will have so much context. That agent to agent communication thing is still like, we'll come back to the MCP thing in a second, but it's still basically non-existent.
right.
In a true sense, right? Like there's the agent architectures that, so Andrew NG, he talked about this at the LangChain conference, right? And he's the OG of like everything AI applications, and the deep learning kind of content that he makes is excellent. I've done a few of those. I don't know if you've done any of them, but he said basically, and he would know, he's basically like, one team making agents that communicate with each other, this is kind of like, I'm paraphrasing what he said, is generally okay, but it's still flaky and challenging. But he said he hasn't really seen anything effective where different developer teams have built agents and they communicate and collaborate effectively.
Right.
Like it's just not happening in any meaningful way.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think what's different about Microsoft is that they're focused on business users, business environment, like knowledge workers and things like that, where mostly everyone else at the moment is focused on developers.
Well, I guess it's right. Like if you play that out, they own the stack, they own the application layer as well. So they own, like, so they have the infrastructure and they have the application layer. They're probably the only company that has that comprehensively down. Like Google's getting there with Workspace.
Yeah.
But it's not nowhere near the scale, right? So if anyone's going to execute it properly, it's them, because they've got the context, they've got the infrastructure, and then they can unify the communication between agents executing, because they own the environment. Yeah. Did you see they have like, they launched like a local dev tool, this Foundry, like AI Foundry, like local tool. And then there's also like these agent kind of service orchestration things you can start building within there. I don't know if any of that was particularly new.
Yeah, I don't know if it was new or if I'm talking about the same thing, but I'm a big fan of the Foundry, really the whole ecosystem. I mean, you can say whatever you want about Microsoft, and I'm not a Microsoft fanboy by any means. Like I have my gripes as well, but they've done a fantastic job with AI Foundry. And I think that's the key thing is ecosystem. We don't really have great ecosystems, and Microsoft, as you start looking into these things and seeing how they piece together, like, yeah, I at least think that they're on the right track for their market.
I don't know. I'm a bit of a Microsoft fan, but old school Microsoft fan, like Windows 95.
Yeah. I go back and forth. I mean, I switched off of Mac several years ago, and now I'm back. And actually, right now I'm talking to you on a Windows computer. So to me, whatever.
All right. Anything else on Microsoft?
I don't think so.
I don't know.
I just
Yeah.
think that I'm excited about the ecosystem and the ease of deployments.
You should yeah, maybe on a follow-up, do a quick spin through of some of these things, because I would actually like to understand. So they launched, like I would like to understand how they're actually executing some of this stuff. So you mentioned they launched like the MCP support. The MCP support is an MCP server that's into Windows, like the operating system, right? And it's exposed to files and a bunch of other stuff like these. And then on top of that, they launched App Actions, which is kind of like, I don't know if you've done much iOS development, it's kind of like app exposure points that you can put from your iOS app into like the native phone operating system, so you can trigger actions and do a bunch of stuff. It's kind of like that for Microsoft apps. And then they also launched their own curated, or they will be, I don't know if it's still live yet, but they basically said a curated set of verified secure MCP servers that you can also connect in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I said
MCP
that,
is interesting. Like,
I don't understand what they mean by native MCP, because I saw that you add, I think they're just talking about VS Code. That's what I saw, or that's what I read.
Okay.
And I went to set it up and I was like, okay, you're just telling me that GitHub Copilot, which I don't use, can connect to MCP servers within VS Code. So if there's more to it, great. But that's all I'm aware of at the moment.
On times. All right.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to say about that? Or should we move on down the docket?
Let's jump to, you want to talk about like codecs, sandboxes?
I reckon we've probably got time for one more. So do you want to do any of the stuff you were thinking about on Daytona? And then I can do the creative stuff later. What I find interesting about MCP is like, so I went and I went to a meetup recently to listen to the Letter founders talk through some of their setup. Letter's like a agent system that's a bit less developer focused and a bit, well, it's still a developer toolkit, but it's a bit less kind of enterprise focused. It's a bit more just get agents out there into production and working kind of faster. It's time to agent probably is the key metric, as opposed to say LangChain, which is like orchestration, observability, kind of enterprise infrastructure, or enterprise codes, I should say. But he basically was describing MCP in a pretty interesting way, but also observed that it probably will need to evolve into something a bit more robust before it actually can power a bunch of really hardcore workflows and be adopted for real. Like, I think that's the hype cycle we're in around MCP will fade, and then it will need to be upgraded or replaced by something else.
Right.
Which other thing? Well,
just like you were saying with A2A earlier, you said it basically doesn't exist, and I think a lot of people would say the same thing about MCP. You see stuff like it's not really anything revolutionary, and yeah, maybe that's true, but at least everybody knows what to shoot for, right?
Yeah.
So that goes a long way.
Basically, yeah. So the explainer is sort of like you've got model, and then you need model plural, and then context, right? It's basically just a way to get that to be less developer intensive. Right.
By the way,
the thing about like A2A.
Oh, go ahead.
The thing about A2A is like it does exist. There's an open source package, but it's not scaled into like the Google Cloud environment yet. It's not actually launched. Like, you can't go into the agent space and like really just spin up these agents as they describe. Unlike say the LangChain one you demoed earlier, or some of the Microsoft stuff. Like, they're just not really leaning in hard to the developer experience.
Yeah, and that's what I'm excited for. And it's interesting explaining it to non-technical people. And I've helped a couple of people hook up Claude Desktop, like see what this experience is like for you. And at first, it's hard to understand, but once you have people play with it, it's just like anything. You start to figure it out pretty
Mm.
quick. By the way, I just opened Claude Desktop and it says Claude 4 is out. So that's probably made like big news that we didn't we didn't have here.
Holy shit. That's great. Coming to you live. Claude 4.
Yeah. Interesting. Claude 4.
And just watch all of the developers who have kind of, you know, Claude 3.5, 3.7, like integrated, just fucking freak out.
Yeah. Well, I'll try
Can't wait for
something
every-
here and hopefully I don't
Can't wait
pop
for every
into like
single
a
prompt that I've built into a workflow break now.
Okay, so I guess to give some context here on the what we're about to jump into, if you've asked your AI agent to like write a simple app, you see the interpreter like a Python and all the code coming through, right? So that's been around for a while, and in most cases, that's just running on your computer. It's running your terminal. So back in November, I think it was November last year, Anthropic came out with computer use, and that gave the agents direct access to things like file system tools, being able to run terminals and interpreters on your computer. And then, of course, the computer vision started to become a thing, and then the AI can see your computer. And we've talked a lot about like browser use and things like that.
Mm.
So
And the operator model, you know,
right,
very
right,
expensive. And
yeah,
then
there's
all the open source
so many
versions.
things. And then
Really,
what's really
a really
gotten my attention lately is the remote sandbox. So this is like, I was thinking about how to this point we've basically given our agents like a piece of paper, like think of like a scratch pad. Like here, you can take your notes here and you throw it away when we're done. Well, what these tools like Daytona can do is they spin up containerized environments in the cloud, and your agent can fully use them. So it's like going from your agents having a piece of paper scratch pad to having their own dedicated computer, which is a big deal. So I'll show some things, but I thought this was interesting. This is Cloudflare. So they something else I found out this week. It's not technically released, I don't think, but they have a repo where you can set up a Cloudflare sandbox as a MCP. So, and I guess this doesn't have to be specific on Daytona.
So are they getting into?
So, well, I'll just talk
so
through
like this is
like
containerized environments, right? They're getting into. Does that mean they've actually got their own competing like containerized environment product? I didn't know that.
They put out some blog post about containers coming to Cloudflare. So today
cool.
they have an amazing stack. I'm a huge fan of what Cloudflare's doing, but there are limitations running in the workers environment. You can't install custom packages and things like that. So my understanding is that they're rolling out containers, and that will allow you to bring your own packages, giving you much more flexibility in what type of applications and operations you can do in the Cloudflare environment native. So this example, this is Claude Desktop. I added a Cloudflare MCP server, and actually it's like 3 lines of code that you add to your config. You don't have to install anything because they're using it's just npx. This created a sandbox in the Cloudflare environment. And sometimes it will error. You'll see errors, and what it might
classic,
get the
classic MCP.
Yeah, it might get the commands wrong or something to begin with. So this, as you can see, spun up a sandbox, and now we're running commands directly against that. So, and I hope this is the right one. I did a couple of these yesterday. I took some sample financial sheets. These are like out of a QuickBooks demo.
Oh, yeah.
And I just said analyze these files. And this is the interesting part that I didn't catch initially, but it says, do you want me to create a Cloudflare project? So I uploaded those files.
And then, sorry, go back up. What's it doing? It's previous there, documents successfully uploaded, and then it gives you, okay, it's just.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's actually more than just a terminal interpreter. It's file system as well. So you can upload files. And actually, now that I'm talking through this, like I said, I did this with Daytona and Cloudflare, and I'm like trying to talk at the same time. Is this actually running in Cloudflare or Daytona? But you get the point. It's a sandbox.
Yeah.
So
in that sandbox, can you configure like, so that they give you like, all right, here's a database, he's like a, SQLite or like something more robust, like a PG, like Postgres or a PG vector, like can it be like that comprehensive, or is it just like a virtual, like a container?
It's a container, but you can install packages. I haven't specifically tried databases or SQLite or anything like that, but
so you'd have to connect it up to like a Superbase or like one of these like serverless kind of database providers as well.
Yeah, and that's why I'm excited about Cloudflare, because they have D1 databases, which are SQLite, and they have what's called bindings. So instead of exposing an API or things like that, you just add like one line and you say, this worker has access to whether it's D1 SQL storage, R2 blob storage, workers AI gateway, their entire stack is available via bindings. So if you're running a Cloudflare sandbox, you should be able to at least use bindings, I believe, and we can try that. But I'm missing something on Daytona because its file system. You can pull that up, see if what I missed.
Do you want to pull up the Daytona website as well?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of these guys out there. It'd be good to compare them. So there's Daytona. I've recently discovered them, to be honest. Then there's E2B. I don't know if you played with E2B as well. They're one of the players, I guess. They basically talk about like its code execution, data analysis, any of these kind of light, lower level kind of code execution kind of workflows. But none of them are doing like the next phase up, which is like, all right, here's like a virtual machine with a more comprehensive suite of software tools that your agents can then interact with at the time. Which is what I'm keen to see if they can push into for some of these more complicated agent workflows as well.
And that's actually what I am trying to show here, is that, I guess I could just explain it while I'm pulling this up, but what this flow ended up doing was creating a Cloudflare worker, which is essentially a server, and it deployed a server in the sandbox. And then it created a website, essentially like a web app. And then I could access the web app externally.
Yeah, right. Have you also checked out like the computer use, sorry, the virtual desktops and the browser use components of these? So like these guys, for example, just do browser. Or integrated computer use. You've seen these guys?
Well, I'm sharing my screen. What are you?
Sorry. I'll show you in a minute.
Yeah, there's some really interesting projects, startups around browser use and headless browsers and things like that. Now Daytona, I guess you can see along the side here. So you can create your sandboxes, and you can create them directly in the dashboard, or your agents can spin them up and discard them. And then you can also add your own custom images. I haven't messed with that yet. And container registries. And I don't know for sure. I imagine that's where you can set up like pre-configured images and name them when you're requesting from your agent, I would assume. I'm not totally sure there.
That image is just like a Docker container, right? I assume.
Here, let's just try this. Let me just ask it to recreate this whole workflow.
First try of the new Claude model. I'm keen to dive into those actually. How much more creative they are.
What's interesting is I have like 30 MCP servers added to Cloud Desktop, and then I'm connecting to like LangGraph agents via MCP, and then they have their set of tools as well. So it's not the right way to design it, I don't think, but it starts to become like Inception, and getting it to use the right tools is very difficult. You know, like in this example, I have Daytona sandboxes available and Cloudflare. So you have to be like really explicit if you're trying to do something with a particular platform. So
what's the benefit actually while this is spinning up? What's the benefit you find of Claude Desktop? Because I don't use it at all.
MCP. It's one of the only,
I don't know.
It's one of the only solid, like really solid MCP servers that are clients, I mean, that are out there. That's not a coding IDE.
It sort of looks like and feels like the UI is structured kind of like a Jupyter notebook. It's sort of what it feels like code execution in sequence.
Yep. So here you see it created the sandbox in Daytona. It's uploading those files. So it's using its own dedicated computer behind the scenes.
Oh, this is rad. So if you click on that sandbox,
the big deal with the containerization, of course, is security as well. So a lot of people unsure. Goes back to the trust thing. You're running open source, untrusted software. So in this, you can actually use Git, and you can clone repos directly to the sandbox. And then you execute the code in the sandbox, totally separate from your computer. Now, the interesting thing with this, I would love to know other people's thoughts, but there's a big gap, I think, in file uploads when it comes to really every AI tool. So you see here, I uploaded these files, and it's passing all of the content through the LLM, when really what we're doing is we just need the files to exist in the sandbox, and then we'll execute against those files in the sandbox. So it just seems really inefficient. Like we need more of a pipeline or something where you just can upload files without passing it all through the LLM, I think. Yeah, and so another big thing is these new sandboxes and remote execution environments, they really enable what are we calling it? Long run, like we're talking about these multi-step, multi-agent designs that can run for 15 minutes in the background, right? So this really makes that possible. And you can, on top of that, your agents, they can spin up multiple sandboxes. In fact, it might do that as part of this. We'll see. But then you can start doing parallel tasks separately. And that's a thing that I've already run into with, I use Claude Desktop, ChatGPT desktop version, and some others. And there are times where I'm like, I don't have enough tools here. They're all running at the same time. You know, it starts to get kind of crazy.
Well, on that, like, how, because this is what I discussed with these guys when I met them the other day, sort of like one of these things, like, yeah, you can create like swarms of these things, like literally on the fly. You can spin up thousands at a time, particularly if you've got workflows triggering that, like these ambient agents that, you know, trigger on events, and then they can spin up any number of these environments. What does the cost profile look like? Like, how do these guys do it? Like, so if I want to sleep it while this agent waits for another kind of supervisor agent to go and re-engage, how fast do they start back up? Like, if I, like, what's the, do I have to keep them like hot loaded so that their latency isn't terrible? Like, what's the profile of that? And then, like, do I get like a $100,000 bill at the end of the month for thousands of containers that have been sitting around doing nothing? Or
well, we were talking a little bit about Manus yesterday, and it does exactly that. Like, it runs for like 15 minutes at a time, and it made me wonder, you know, when you talk about what's the cost, how many companies will start offloading and doing more like batch processing, or running at, you know, where the usage at the provider's not high at the moment and it's less cost, like that type of thing. As we start queuing up jobs, finding efficiencies in how we're processing the data. Because when you're using the desktop clients, of course, like whatever task you're trying to execute, you want it right now. But where we're headed is more like, here's my task list for the day.
Yeah.
Go do these things. Let me approve them and review before we take action. But all these things run in the background. So these tools that we're talking about really are the next step in that direction.
Yeah, you can see that the way that the guys, like the different providers, deliver those kinds of flexible workloads in their APIs, right? And that would make sense that you'd be able to do something similar with this. So OpenAI have like the batch processing API runs that are way cheaper. They're like, all right, if I can get you these results in 24 hours, then you can pay like way less than if you need it right now.
So this, you can see it runs, it takes forever. And I think part of that is inefficient, the way that it has to process everything through. I don't know. It starts to become a little bit confusing when it's like Inception. But going back to your question about the database, I don't know if you saw up here, it said it created a database and schema.
Oh yeah, just
sorry, I was I was on the previous run. Here we go.
Phase 7, create database schema, RAG agent delegation. And these guys basically just pre-configure everything. What do you have to select the Daytona like type? Like, did you define the image type in there, or did the agent just do that for you?
Image? What kind of image?
Well, like, you know, it's a VM with this kind of configuration, these kind of tools, these kinds of things, like what it has access to, or is it just like the agent's just executing that on the fly? You didn't have to do any of that setup.
Yeah, my prompt was like very generic. I think it was like, do some data analysis, and then
data analysis.
Yeah, and then it created a whole plan and decided what tools to use, how it's going to use them, And in this instance, I think it's this instance, it basically is building an app and then throws it away. So people talk about composability and things like that. So that's, I mean, we're already to the point where you can build apps and throw them away, one-time use.
It's like just-in-time software kind of concept.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We spoke about it before, but you see Databricks, I believe, bought Neon, the database, like that serverless database company Neon. One of the reasons why they cited it, or was cited at the time, is this like agent executions just create like way more on the fly file management data or data stores than human developers. Just like the number of these things that are going to be spun up with these providers is going to be many times the number of like regular developer executions.
Right.
The documentation for Daytona is pretty good. So basically it's like in the toolbox you get, so you get Git operations, talking through it here, the file system engine, the directories. Okay. Then they have like the SDK on top, and then obviously code execution, which is what you're showing. But then you can also get the logs, right? That's cool.
Yeah, and like you were talking about deep wiki earlier. I mean, it depends who you're talking to, but I think it really is underrated. Like what you can do with adding context and adding tools. You know, another example that I ran earlier, we were talking about docetl. So if you want to put together a docetl pipeline, they've started working on a prompt. You can prompt and it will create your pipeline. I can't remember if it actually works. There's some notes out there on the repo like, hey, we started this, it doesn't really work. But essentially what I did was I didn't even feed it the repo and the code. I fed it the paper about it. So it just talks about the concepts.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
And then it created the whole docetl pipeline based on the paper and analyze the data. So, you know, we can do more like deep dive demos and I can be more prepared. This is very on the fly, but it's absolutely amazing to me.
I don't know what your preference is for that, but I've tried, like, I'll go into, if I've got like a concept I'm exploring, I'll go into like O3 with the concept and then reference like things like that. So I'll say like, here are the concepts that I'm trying to explore. I was doing this in memory kind of architecture, agent memory architecture in the actual applications. It's like database model design. Like what's my optimal model design for storing in a relational database with a vector store on top for this memory layer that I was trying to think of. And I would just put in like research articles or like concepts or like, you know, chunks of text to then can go into like the code execution model. You do a similar thing.
Oh yeah. That's what I meant earlier. I'll have like 3 different agents and apps pulled up and using them all together for, you know, like planning, and then copy that to verification layer and then execute. I use a broad combination of things. And really looking forward to, I think it was Sam, maybe not Sam, somebody was talking about we have too many choices and it will be more intelligent. So like depending on the task, it will pick the models, which is really great because it's kind of out of hand. Even for people who are deep into it, it's like
their one's out of hand now. Like it's like I don't really know. I just like just choose for me. Like that's why when I use Cursor, I always leave it on auto mode because I just want them to optimize into the best model selection for the task at hand. Interestingly, Google actually released one of their things from their release was the reasoning threshold. So think for longer or token limit on your reasoning. They said, look, with a human, like you're like, all right, I need this task done. You know, can you think about this for a bit? But you know, only spend a day on that, and then we're going to start building out the plan. It's like the equivalent of that. You need more human level parameter control over these models for the kinds of things that they're thinking through.
Right.
Interestingly, on that design, like we were just talking about, like the agent design, right? Everything at the LangChain conference, all of the ones that we saw, everyone is coalescing around the supervisor model, right? For what you're describing, which is like there needs to be an execution layer that chooses where it goes for the next step into a specific like agent next or agent outcome. Very few people are going with the workflow step by step equivalent agent architecture, mainly because of latency. Even though it improves quality outcomes, it seems like the step, like the sequential or the workflow architecture, like it goes into the planning agent, then it goes into the coding agent, then it goes into the analysis agent, or whatever the framework you've got, basically takes forever.
Yeah, it does. And that's where
so this is the output. Yeah.
Well, as you can see, so it gave me a link and it said made this dashboard, but it's pretty terrible, right? So and the same thing happened when I ran it yesterday. In fact, yesterday it didn't show up at all. It was just a blank white page the first time. And then I just give it some feedback. I tell it to do better. I don't know if this changed. No, I can't upload this image. That's weird.
It's PNG. That's okay. It's really cool.
Okay, I would spend more time with this prompt usually, but on the spot here, that'll do.
Yeah, make it better. Make it better.
But yeah, you get the idea. So I think that's amazing. It just spun up a cloud app, a one-time use cloud app. And we see this within other, in fact, Cloud Desktop can do that as well. I don't know if you create artifacts and then you can publish them and I can send you a link to an artifact. But now, and this is a Daytona function. So if you notice the URL, it's a Daytona.com or Daytona.work domain. So of course, security issues there, potentially you'd have to figure out a better way. But for proof of concept and showing capabilities, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I think it's incredible. Like I want to play with these things more. This, what I might get you to just put this on the screen briefly. So have you tried, in addition to this, have you tried E to B at all?
I've heard you talk about it. Yeah, I haven't tried it yet.
Pull up the website. I think it's pretty interesting. It's
Did you see this?
Dev.
Did you see this dashboard? I mean, it's like kind of elementary looking, but this is what it came up with.
That's great.
So
I love these.
So yeah,
like
very soon you'll just tell your agent in the morning, you'll say, here are my reports, create one, and then it'll send it back to you when it's done.
I think one of the use cases for this, right, is I want ambient agents, or I keep using that term, but agents that basically go away, look at they find insights in my business context. So we talk about business user that is cents on the dollar relative to a human kind of task, like a human doing the work, which means that those jobs never get done and that data never gets looked at. But in this context, that information can be surfaced. So you talk about just-in-time software. It's like a scalable way to expand the available amount of work that can be done. A lot of people think it's like a cost reduction exercise in these things. They look at it as like, all right, well, that's like a cost reduction of the number of people that will need to do these tasks. But actually, I think it's the opposite. It's like these tools expand those things so that, this is as bad as it's going to get. A lot of people say that. So that example you've got, you'd have like hundreds of those agents going across, millions and millions of business documents, if it's in the case of like an internal business kind of use case. looking to surface insights that would not necessarily have been surfaced, so that you could act on them. I think it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
I totally agree. I mean, most companies and people who work at companies, it's a matter of choosing what can I ignore and everything will be fine, right? So this allows us, as we can deep dive and quickly get more information, it's not that we're going to run out of tasks, you know, like I've never heard of a business that's like, hey, we did it. We're done. You will always have
We're done,
things
guys.
to do, right?
We're done, guys. It's finished. Yeah, well, I'll just pull this up. You want to head to just pull up the E2B website and you can see what it's like, and they have a GitHub repo as well, which is really good.
Yeah.
I reckon we should
Just a quick
do a demo of that later.
LangChain plug while you're pulling that up. LangChain has a prebuilt for computer use, and it uses Scrappybera for the container, and that one is a like Linux desktop. And it's kind of like using it is kind of like if you've used browser use, you know, it pops up a screen, but it's using an actual computer. Very similar to the Anthropic demo that they first put out. But LangChain has a great prebuilt where you can do that.
Yeah, so the generative UI example from LangChain, I think is like a great simple demo of this. If I can spin it up here. Yeah. With the history. Yeah, this is that UI, the app they've deployed it to. It's just a Viscella. Like go to Google and find me flights from LA to SF next week. See how this guy goes. And in the back end, he did a really good, he really did a really good overview of how it works using Scrappybera, which is this, while that's loading up, which is this kind of like, I don't know, would you call this like a virtual, it's like a remote desktop instance is what they call it, but is it like a virtual environment? Like, is this like a Daytona equivalent?
Yeah, very similar, just maybe different use cases, but yeah, they're all just virtual machines.
I don't know if you played with this. The thing I like about it is like it has a inbuilt mechanism to share credentials. So to give credentials to your agent, you can just spin it up here and like just say, go to this thing, do this. A really good like playground. Here we go.
Yeah, it's a big deal. That's the number one complaint you heard when OpenAI announced Operator.
So this like these guys basically have this execution here, and like they've got like a capture, but you can then go and interact with these UI components and just like, all right, I'm not a robot, I'm gonna do my capture on behalf of these guys. Let's see if I can get through this thing.
Sometimes I still feel like I haven't figured that out. I'm like, is the motorcycle, is it partially on the page? Do I choose this?
Am I really a robot? Am I not? Yeah. Let's see what it's doing. Let's get the screenshot. Let's continue. And this effectively is the containerized version, kind of like a Daytona equivalent, right? And you can have thousands, hundreds of these running on all sorts of tasks across your different agents. Have you come across anyone that's trying to, this guy's in a bit of a, he's probably finished, no? Oh, there's doing more research, looking for more flights, but you get the idea. Have you done any or seen any examples of like this, like containerized, like you've got an agent that's working in a container or doing sort of certain compute use things that then pushes the output to another agent that has like an execution layer? So can you like take effectively the state within one container and push it to another? Or take the data or take the output?
Yeah, I haven't, but that's where I was talking about, like in the Cloudflare example, you have native access to all your databases and things like that. So I've started exploring like having one agent use a MCP server to save data to like a database and maybe some instructions, and then your other agents that are connected to that same resource via MCP can pick up on that. And there are other ways. I mean, LangGraph, that's really one of the primary selling points of LangGraph is the memory, and you can share that memory between agents. I just really haven't done a ton with it, but yeah, it's going to open up so many different avenues. Have you seen examples?
Yeah, I'm wondering about
of that?
Like, I haven't, no, but I'm thinking about it. It's sort of like, all right, if you have, that supervisor agent architecture, if you've got like a virtual container, and then you're like, all right, the agent that I asked to do this task runs into like an issue, if it can pass that back up to like an expert agent, for example, if you're working with a certain kind of, I don't know, say you're working with like a virtual container which is doing data analysis like yours, and then you have a data analysis like agent that is more technical. If it needs to can debug certain things, like if you've got a more effective way to debug things, or if you need a reasoning agent, or if you need a reasoning agent to come in over the top of, say, just an execution agent and change something in the actual container that they're working on, can you execute within the one environment, or then take that environment and give it to another one to continue a task?
Oh yeah, specifically with the containers. And I was trying that. I think actually that is possible. I was reading through documentation. I tried like simple prompts like list the containers, and then it didn't work, but I barely tried that. So
it'd be interesting to see how it evolves. Yeah, so this guy, I don't know, he's looking for flights. I might just cut him off. But that's a really cool, like, we'll put it in the show notes, you can play with this one. The thing that, yeah, I'm interested in that like orchestration layer of how they pass these like containers to other people, or how they pass like the output of what's going on. Because a lot of the examples, like say Daytona or these guys, E2B, which is another version of this, they often say it's like a swarm. There's like thousands of things executing at once, or like the variation. So you get like they get to a point, you're like, all right, well, you want to create branching executions of like a coding agent to solve a problem in different ways with different prompts maybe in your stack. It's always like a let 1,000, ideas bloom kind of idea, as opposed to they can collaborate and use these environments together.
Right.
Yeah, these are all the use cases these guys highlight. There's a really good interview with the founder of these guys, of E2B, talking about the specific use cases he's seeing emerge.
Yeah. So this computer use example, you don't have to set up anything locally. They provide the graph in the background, and then you just provide the Scrappybara API, and that's it.
Well, in this example, they just created a demo app that they actually just pay for, so they're just running the instance. But I think you can only hit it so many times, and then they shut it down. On this URL, which we'll share.
Got it. So you just log in. You create a login, and that's it, and then it's ready to go.
No login. I think they'll probably take this down at some point, because it's just a demo app, really.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know how I missed that, but I downloaded the repo and set it up.
Yeah, you can do it like this, probably better, but it was just a demo tutorial here as well, which is really good. Like, and he goes through how he actually built it.
Yeah, well, these things I'm super excited about, because when Anthropic released computer use, I was amped about it. And there were a lot of questions, like security and what's the value in giving your computer the ability to take screenshots, essentially. And it's like, yeah, well, it actually is a big deal when you combine it with all these other things. And now with the containers and virtual machines, like I said, my analogy is it's like going from writing on a piece of paper to now you have a computer. So
yeah, super exciting. All right, I reckon that's it. This is a great conversation.
Yeah, I think.